We started working together about a month and a half ago?
Month and a half, sounds right. Yep.
And you actually sent in a request form months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then tell the listener kind of your background story so they have an understanding of where you were, what your background is, and where you were when you decided, I got to contact Robin.
So initially when I contacted you, I was in the middle of doing an HCG protocol, and I was...
Your first round, your second round?
This was I want to say my first round when I initially contacted you, and then I changed my mind because I didn't want it to be hard, and I just wanted my quick fix. I wanted the weight off.
Got it. So hold on. So you had... Hold on. You'd watched my YouTubes then.
Yeah.
And so you're like, Robin's a little crazy. She's going to tell me I have to let go of my desire to be thin, and she can screw up. I'm going to be thin.
Yeah.
I'm not quitting yet, right?
Yeah.
So that's why you contacted me, and then I didn't hear from you.
Right.
And then you contact me again. So okay, go ahead.
So I was in the middle of my second protocol at the time, and my second protocol kept getting stretched out because I just couldn't do it right. I'd lost I think 20-something pounds my first time around, and then this time around I just couldn't do it. I kept cheating, I kept binging, I kept doing all these things that were not working anymore, and I couldn't understand why, and I just...
Yeah, and I wrote you...
stayed on the protocol for a year.
Yeah, I have an entire chapter dedicated to the second round of HCG and Weight Loss Apocalypse. How it is so much harder the second time. Same protocol. Anyway, so that's real. That's a real deal. That's enough that I dedicated a chapter to it. So, then go ahead.
So, I was just sort of done with it at that time. I was like, I don't know where I'm going to go with you, honestly. I'd heard all the videos, and people were like, oh my gosh, this place sounds amazing. It just sounded like such a great place to be emotionally, and...
Yeah, how easy it is. Yeah, how people just stop caring about their weight. Sounds crazy, right? How do you get something so important to you, important to your life, that's so important to our culture? How do you make it not important? Especially when you want it as badly as you do, right? Anyways, and how these people who are bona fide binge eaters, gone to therapists, clinics, and anything around the spectrum, right? Because it wasn't just binge eaters I talk about. And I talk within the YouTubes. It's the anorexics, orthorexics, all of it, right? And how do they all of a sudden just go, I don't give a shit. I just had a cupcake and I was like, it's all right, and stopped eating it. That type of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyways.
And I was looking for that fix. I was looking for something to give me more control. And I didn't think that when we were working together, it was like, this is definitely not giving me control. In fact, I'm losing control. And so there was a battle sort of going on in my head. And I told you at one point, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Things are not clicking, and I need to just quit because I feel like I'm not in control. I didn't realize that that's where we were going with all of it,
Mm-mm. No, and that's what has to happen. Do you see that now? That you have to let go, and then you have to be in that space of surrender. It's hard to explain. It's hard for me to explain the process because it isn't a step by step. I can try to formulate a step by step process like the 5 steps of recovery.
Right.
You remember what those are?
I think so.
But how to get step 1, I don't have a process of other than imagining it happening and making it real. The making it real part is where it becomes powerful to the brain. So anyway, so we went through a lot of sessions, and it was we would start, you would be one way, and then the session would end a different way, right? Where you'd be like, okay, I think I got it. And then, a few days would pass, and you would come back going, I'm overeating. I do feel better. I have connected this to this. Like, I do know I don't want to diet, but Robin, I'm still overeating. And I kept on saying to you, this has nothing to do with the food. Absolutely nothing to do with the food. In fact, we don't need to talk about the food or the hunger scale. Do you remember that? Like, waste of our time, waste of your money. Yeah. And it did get frustrating. I remember you saying, Robin, I do feel different, but I don't feel like those clients.
Yeah.
I don't feel this like...
I didn't feel happy. I wasn't getting this, like, ecstasy place where I was hearing everyone be, and I'm like, wait, I just feel like shit because...
I'm getting fatter and I'm overeating.
I feel because I know I'm not going back to those ways, and there is some, like, contentment in that, but, like, also feeling that now my body is sort of moving in a direction that I don't want it to go. Because
you were still overeating, and it was that, yeah, and I had to go, well, the overeating comes from the fact that you may have gotten rid of that smaller idea, number one.
Yeah.
You accepted where you were at, number two, but you didn't do number three, which is you have to ultimately give the body complete and total freedom, which means it might get fatter. And your fear of that continued that old wiring, that old fight or flight. Food is going to be scarce. I have to fix this. Like, you never really fully let go of the thinner ideal, which is, I understand that. Even if you didn't understand that, I know when people come to me, they are going to put it in a closet. However, the initial steps of the recovery process give you immediate relief.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right? So you did experience this, like, binging just gone.
Binging was, yeah. I think after the first session, the binging was gone.
Yeah. So binge eaters listening are going, how the hell do you do that? And it's really simple, isn't it? It doesn't take, we're going to remove all the sugar and we're going to get away from every narcotic possible because you have a disease. Like, that is the opposite of the reality here, right? We have to go... Stop thinking about the food. That is the obvious thing that you're consciously aware of. Why do we have to fixate on that? We got to go to where you're unconsciously not looking at the shame about your body, the fantasies that you expected from yourself, the victimization around my life sucks because I'm fat, which is totally based on cognitively distorted concepts of what's acceptable. That comes from the narcissism, right?
Yeah.
Even people who are listening is going, I'm not a narcissist.
And feeling like, oh, I know I'm better. And once I get there, my real life will start. That was the foundation which destroyed whatever, like, real life and real spirit was in my, like, true nature.
Yes. This is that fight or flight survival mode that we all are capable of. And now... Okay, so I'm going to go get to that in a second. So we were on, like, our 7th session, and it was just like, look, dude, I remember at some point when I work with clients, there is that one session where I'm like, you're not taking me serious. You're not making it real. I know you're holding on to thin supremacy, which is, you cannot escape with that because that is the cause. And actually, if we go deeper, the cause is your desire to be wanted and liked, and that need to be loved and accepted with superiority. So it's the narcissism, right? The fear of inferiority, or believing that if you're inferior, that you suck. You actually believe that. So that has to be accepted. So I remember saying to you, you have to be okay with sucking. You have to, and use the term suck, like, because that's relative to the narcissism. So you can't negotiate with common sense because the whole process is created out of nonsense. So you have to negotiate with nonsense. You're going to be a failure. You're going to be a loser. No one's going to want you. And we have to go into that and not feel like a martyr. Because the martyr and victim positionality, that is the flip side of narcissism. That means that your narcissist.
I'm going to make myself sound like
correct. So so the narcissistic supply, that would be any person, item, belief, or system that provide you superiority. So in terms of religion, it would be who am I if I'm not affiliated to that superior religion, or if I'm rejected by that? Who am I if my body, that was your narcissistic supply, and we could say what you do for a living and your education was narcissistic supply, and we kind of had to, now that you're out, you see now like it was all part of that inferiority fear that was triggering fight or flight.
Completely.
Yeah.
And you basically construct your life in a way that would just support your narcissism in so many different
Well, and culture.
It goes well beyond weight and your body image. It goes into every aspect of your life.
Yeah. So if we take a step out and look at our culture, but wouldn't you agree a humongous part of how we thrive in this first world environment is by selling superiority? Buy the new phone, wear the newest clothes, get the better education. And again, it changes depending on what part of the country you're in, right? So, you know, what is seen as superior in Washington, D.C. is very different than what's seen is superior in New York City, which is very different than the Southern Bible Belt area, which is unique to California, which is totally different than Oregon and Washington State, which is different than, you know, what makes you superior is relative to that social construct.
Right.
And for some reason, you know, we are supporting culturally and not questioning this system that literally creates an inferiority complex, which we could say is a huge trigger to that third hierarchy of need, which is what makes you valuable to your tribe, to your pack.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what makes you lovable. Well, you got to be superior at something. And you kind of have a unique story because your parents came here from out of country.
From India. Right.
From India. And you were like, not only do you need to come here and integrate, but you have to do very well in this system so that you can be just seen as a neutral party of the country. You can't just be neutral and come from another country here, right? So the pressure to perform for you and to be superior was, man, that started early in your development.
Very early. I think the only time I remember really being content with who, and I think I fought it for a little while as a child. Even my little brain was like, fine. But, I didn't buy into it. But at some point, I think probably a little before middle school, I would say, it started seeping in. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am like not worthy of anything. You know, who I am as a person just is not cutting it.
Yeah, well, and you're starting to compare yourself to that girl's prettier, that boy is smarter than me, that group of people are having more fun, like they have something I don't. And that's the beginning of the fantasy. Right? Where you are starting to fantasize about the solution and the brain. So we could say prior to that, when you start comparing yourself to these ideals, that's where this feeling begins. Yeah. Then in order for your brain to create equilibrium, it's got to fantasize about a solution. So you could say you've been in fight or flight and survival mode since how old?
Probably 11, 12.
Yeah, and you didn't even know it, right? Because you don't, because you're constantly, you're just constantly trying to feel there. So what happens is if you don't desensitize the trigger, okay, what you're going to end up doing is seeking something to create equilibrium, which would equal a narcotic, right? Because that narcotic area of the brain can create balance between the inflammation and, so the negative inflammation and the positive narcotic. Right? So if we don't desensitize the trigger, which would be go into the bear's cave and learn the environment, right? And allow the body to realize this isn't something to be fearful of, right? Learn rejection. Go into, which is desensitizing the trigger to fight or flight. I mean, again, on a side note, We are third world evolved mammals in a first world environment. So to think that we have all of this luxury, that we're not going to have fight or flight, is just, honestly, it's kind of crazy, but I think we're so stuck in it that how much of our of America or any first world environment is living in this state of fight or flight, and they think that it's normal. That's how we're supposed to be. And we're supposed to reach for the stars, and we're supposed to have something special, and we're supposed to be superior. Like, that's normal.
Right.
So
everyone.
Now I'm talking about this, and is it not just like, oh my God, this is so freaking obvious on the other side?
Yeah.
Because you're in a new state of being, right?
Yeah.
Your brain is functioning differently. We don't know, but you can tell. Your whole body should feel different. You haven't lost an ounce of fat. You're eating food that you've been thinking were bad for you for, food you thought you had to eliminate to be healthy. You're eating all these things that the entire health industry says you can't eat that or you're going to be sick. Right? Fear-based, again, if you're healthy, that would be the fantasy, euphoric, narcotic that's going to try to combat your fear of disease, right? Which is complete lower state fight or flight type of balancing. We went into the bear's cave. You're eating a biscuit, bread, cheese. You're eating things that are really bad for you.
Yeah.
And now that you're desensitized to being rejected and abandoned because of your body, and because of whatever it is, your health image, which is huge, what happened to the fight or flight symptom?
It went away. Completely went away. I mean, I don't think I've had that. I don't remember, besides as a child, I don't remember being in this state of relaxed, no anxiety, no 3, 4, 5 thoughts at the same time.
What happened to the perfectionism? What's happened to the perfection?
Oh God, that is so out of the
okay.
That's the idea that I would ever want that to be perfect, or this image that should be there. It's disgusting to me now. I'm like, no.
I know.
This is real.
So that's something that's praised in this culture of fight or flight. You realize that, oh, I'm a perfectionist. Are you proud of that? Because that is the definition of suffering. I've lived in that, right? That is the definition of crazy training. Micromanagement.
If you say that, right? If you say that this is here's this image and this is what's perfect and this is what I want to become, you're essentially saying to yourself that you're not good enough.
Totally.
And that is such negativity to the core of who you are.
To your
prime. All the good things that you are. It's just like a slap on the face. And you're doing it to yourself. I get all these other things that are outside of me, and I think what resonated with me when you were talking was wow, I did internalize this at some point. And of course, you do it in a very innocent way. You don't realize you're doing it at the time because it's probably happening when your brain is not fully formed and all that stuff.
And you didn't have your parents weren't out of fight or flight to be able to help you. This is where, to me, this is so innocent. This isn't something to be judged at all, even narcissism, because if you don't have first of all, if you don't have enough suffering inside of that crazy shit and enough addiction to try to maintain equilibrium that sabotages your life, you're probably not going to do anything about it because you don't realize you're stuck in a state of fight or flight that is really only meant to be there temporarily. Right? Or to recall bears are dangerous.
Right.
The recall, but you're recalling I'm fat and ugly and inferior. I'm fat and ugly and inferior. And then you start fantasizing about the equilibrium, which is the fantasy is the narcotic. Now, when I say that, go back to how often you've used to fantasize about what your life would be like thinner. Everybody think about that. You are getting high in that moment, just thinking about it. People who are addicted to, let's just say, alcohol, once you realize I'm going to go get a drink, you're higher. You are so high just knowing I'm going to go get it.
even right before a binge.
Oh, yeah.
That used to be me, you know?
Yeah, it had nothing to do with the food.
Really excited, like, oh my God, something that I can do, you know?
You're free. It's a moment of freedom from all of that micromanagement, all of that insane perfectionism for a moment. You get that release from the perfectionism.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, this isn't because you weren't educated. Do you mind sharing to the listener the degree of education that you have?
Sure. I'm an MD, and I'm an internal medicine attending. So I've been through medical training and medical school, as well as residency, and I've practiced for 3 years outside of residency.
Yeah. So when part of the work you had to do is get over this concept of, well, isn't it unhealthy? And shouldn't I be, the unhealth of the food? And there was you're also coming to the table with not just extreme degrees of education, which you also came to the table with all of that somewhat health righteousness and shame, right? Because you're practicing, what you're doing, and you should be healthy if you're practicing this.
Right.
And so the stigma of the concept of being unhealthy, it's a concept of being unhealthy. Do you see that now?
Yeah, completely.
Which stems from someone's
it's really
fear.
Like the health, what are we calling healthy, right? You are in constant battle with the person that you are, and in this spiritual struggle, and you're never really living in the moment, and you're never really enjoying anything because you're trying to get to this idea of perfection in your head.
Or survival, keep in mind.
Yeah, or survival. You're not healthy. That's not a healthy state to be in.
It's not. And there's nothing.
Yeah. Like, you're not making any sort of happy hormones. Like, it is just for your body to be in that fight or flight all the time. You're wrecking it. You're wrecking your body in that moment.